Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, well, I promised you guys I'd go back to the Giro d'Italia and we look at Isaac Del Toro's ride up Col de Fineste, 18 kilometers long at 9.2%. We got to dissect what UAE team Emirates did wrong on that stage. And in order to dissect what went wrong, you have to understand before the stage starts. So the night before, after stage 19 finishes, you have to at that moment assess the situation of Isaac Del Toro and his teammates UAE team Emirates. So if you're the director sportif and we're talking about UAE team Emirates, you have to understand exactly where all of your super domestiques are. Rafael Micah, Brandon McNulty, Adam Yates, and I'll even throw in Igor Arieta there. UAE team Emirates, without a doubt, are the strongest team at the Giro d'Italia in 2025, especially when stage 19 finishes. That means if you're going to bed and you're the director sportif, you know you have the strongest team in the world to go in with Isaac Del Toro when you start with 45 kilometers to go on the stage, Col de Fineste. Now, when that's starting, you got to understand that you might not have riders with Richard Carapaz and with Derek G. You might not have riders with Simon Yates. You might not have riders with Del Toro over the top of that climb or even through that climb, because the main thing that's different about stage 20 versus every mountain stage before stage 20, none of them were 9.2% average, consistent averages throughout the whole climb. When you go into all the other mountain stages and you start looking at 7 and 6%, and sometimes they're hitting 8, and sometimes you'll have a section of 12, 13, or 15%. But you don't have 18 kilometers that's averaging 9.2%. So you got to know at 45 kilometers to go that Del Toro might be isolated going up that climb. It could be that Richard Carapaz is going to be aggressive at the bottom of that climb with his EF Education teammates. In fact, we only need to go into the pre-interviews before the stages even start, where we see Mikel Honore throwing out in his interview that, oh, it's no secret, we have Richard Carapaz on the team, we're going to be aggressive, and it's our job to make the climb difficult. That's what he's saying in his interview. So if he's saying that before the stage and you're the director sportif and it's stage 19 the night of, just before stage 20 starts, the director sportif and all of us sitting on the Chesterfield watching know that Richard Carapaz is going to light something up. You can hear it from the commentators before the race even starts. So the director sportifs, the UAE team members would know that. Then they'd have to assess, okay, can Del Toro climb as good as Richard Carapaz? Okay, I think he can climb as good as Richard Carapaz, and I think he looked even better than Richard Carapaz. Some of you might say, well, stage 11, Richard Carapaz won that stage, and he dropped Isaac Del Toro. I'll tell you, Isaac Del Toro was exceptional on stage 11, attacked and then backed off the throttle, waited for Juan Ayuso, and I believe that was a team tactic that went wrong at that moment, because I think Isaac Del Toro could have went with Carapaz on that stage when he attacked and just out-sprinted him at the finish and won the stage and took the time bonuses. Now, if we back the film up a little bit further and we go into the cobblestone stage, excuse me, not cobblestones, I always call it that, but the White Sands, the Strada Bianchi stage of 9, Del Toro made his first mistake there, and I think that was a team mistake too. He was up the road with Wout van Aert, 3 Ineos riders, and 1 is Egan Bernal. At that moment, if you're Del Toro and you're the UAE team director in the car, and you know you have just Egan Bernal up there as a GC favorite with Del Toro, and if you know Del Toro has real quality GC winning form, Primoz Roglic has crashed, he's already flatted, he's way off the back, Juan Ayuso stuck in the middle, he's sitting on that group, and they have Del Toro sitting on the group with Ineos. If I'm Del Toro, I'm working with Egan Bernal if I believe I have that exceptional kind of form. I couldn't tell you from sitting on the Chesterfield what kind of form Del Toro had on stage 9. I can tell you it's good. I can tell you Egan Bernal's form was good too up until 20 kilometers ago when Del Toro lit him up. But if Del Toro was working with him for 20 kilometers before, that gap would be even bigger on Richard Carapaz. So that was a mistake made, but that's an internal one that the director sportifs have to understand what kind of form Del Toro has, because, of course, Juan Ayuso is back there. So you could either grab Del Toro, bring him back, Juan Ayuso, Del Toro, Brandon McNulty, Bahrain Victorious, as I told you guys live on the Butterfly Effect. They all work together, most likely EF Education working. They gain time on Primoz Roglic. That was an option. I said it's possible, but the other option, now that we're late into stage 19, of course, is that Del Toro would have worked with Egan Bernal and gain time on Richard Carapaz. So none of that happened. We know what happened after stage 9. The Mexican rider got himself in pink. He got second on the stage. Wout van Aert won it. We move into stage 11. Carapaz wins that stage solo, gains time on everyone because the director sportifs of UAE team members had to be telling, and I'm just guessing here, but that is an educated guess, they had to be telling Del Toro that he needs to wait up, go over the top of the climb with the whole team together instead of following Richard Carapaz, which he should have done because he had the legs to do it, and then win the stage right there. So they give up a stage opportunity to win for Del Toro plus the time bonuses, and then the time gain on Simon Yates back there too, which is always something you have to think about. Okay, we fast forward into stage 16. It was the first mountain stage, third week of the Giro d'Italia. It's raining, it's miserable, attacks all over the place. Del Toro cracks. Now, if you see him crack, I believe if you go back to the rest day where we're talking about beyond the coverage, and I'm telling you guys that Del Toro has to eat and drink throughout that stage to be careful so that he doesn't bonk. I believe it was a bonk. One Coke, one Snickers, he doesn't bonk. He finishes up there with Richard Carapaz and company, because if you look at it, when Richard Carapaz is the guy who drops Del Toro, if it was just Richard Carapaz, you'd say, okay, Del Toro got dropped, Richard Carapaz is better. But when you look at everybody on the general classification in the top 10 just about drop Del Toro, it's a bonk. It's a bonk, or the kid has no form whatsoever and it was all fake and he can't do the third week of the Grand Tour. That's always a possibility. But when we go into stage 17, the very next day, and Del Toro still wearing the pink jersey, hanging on to it just barely by seconds, and then he wins that stage, okay, that tells you that the day before 100% was a bonking stage, there's no doubt about it. But with stage 16 being so much rain, so much clutter, so much attacks, so much action happening, it's very, very easy for a veteran rider to forget to eat and drink. I did it during the 2013 Vuelta a España. I forgot to eat and drink correctly on one of the stages, and I had to fake it through the stage. It just wasn't as crazy as stage 16 was, so I was able to get through that stage. But if you're 21 years of age, what I'm trying to get to, it's easy for Del Toro to have bonked on stage 16. When he wins on stage 17, you know he has very good legs. Okay, stage 17 finishes. We come into stage 19. Again, to go back to the start of the video, the director sportifs are setting up their plan for the next day. You have to believe that Del Toro is the best rider in the race, which means that you still expect EF Education, Richard Carapaz's team, to light it up at the bottom. What you need to know before this stage starts is you do not want a satellite rider that can go up the road that can cause problems. If you have Richard Carapaz going up the road from EF Education, you do not want a satellite rider up there that can make it to the summit. I don't care if EF Education has a rider in the break. I don't care if Wout van Aert, who is in the break to start stage 20, Col de Finestre, I don't care if Wout van Aert's in that break, but I don't give that break 10 minutes. That was the mistake when you gave it 10 minutes, because if they have a satellite rider in there, it could be any rider that could get to the top of the climb and then help on the descent before we get into the last 5 kilometers of the finish of that stage, where it's another stick to the finish of talking about 6% climb there. You got somebody that's a satellite rider from Visma Lease Bike, Derek G's team too, Israel Premier Tech, or EF Education, those 3 teams. You have a satellite rider in that big group of 30 plus riders. When you went to bed last night, you didn't care if they have a satellite rider, but it can't have 10 minutes. 4, 5 maybe. 5 is the most you'd want to give it if there was a real climber in that group, because making up 5 in an 18-kilometer climb is doable if he's a good climber to get to the top, so you wouldn't want to have that. But Visma Lease Bike don't have any real super climbers on their team. Wilco Kelderman was climbing okay, so maybe you don't want Wilco Kelderman in the group of 5 minutes. But if Wout van Aert's in that front group of 30 with 5 minutes, he's not getting to the top. I'm not even sweating that. But 10 minutes? As soon as that group had 10 minutes, I knew right away it was problems. So again, night before stage 20, Director Sportif, no satellite riders in the front group, given a 10-minute lead or a 5-minute lead if you have a good quality rider like Wilco Kelderman up there. That can help over the top of the climb for Simon Yates, or EF Education rider like Cepeda that's given 5 minutes or 6 minutes going into the start of that climb. That's a problem. That for sure you don't want, because you know for sure, unless Ralph Amika, Brandon McNulty, or of course Igor Arieta or Adam Yates, or have exceptional legs and you haven't seen them climb in the front group yet, you know that you can expect that they'll get dropped at the bottom of the climb and lose some time, which means Isaac Del Toro is going to be solo on the climb. So if I'm the director sportif, no satellite riders in that front group, and I want my own rider in that front group. We've seen Igor Arieta in the front groups on other mountain stages to begin with, and when stage 20 starts in that 31 rider groups going up the road, you see Wout van Aert's in that group. Israel Premier Tech have Simon Clark. Don't have to worry much about Simon Clark because he's not a climber. But when you start giving 10 minutes, you might have to worry about him. And you certainly have to worry about Wout van Aert because 10 minutes is a lot of time to give to the big guy. He can make it over climbs. We've seen it at the Tour de France, and this is not the Tour de France. This is still a level down from the Tour de France. So at 10 minutes, you got to stress now that Wout van Aert's in there, and you have no Igor Arieta in that front group like we had seen in previous mountain stages. Okay, the climb is coming up. We're 45 kilometers in the stage. EF Education's doing what, to no one's surprise, they're on the front of the peloton. Darren Rafferty's pulling on the front. After, if I back the film up, let me not forget, Casper Asgreen did a lot of pulling. Then Darren Rafferty jumped on the front for EF Education as they're in the climb proper. Darren Rafferty's throwing it all into it, under the pedals. We see the peloton start to blow up about 25, 30 guys back as it's starting to split. Darren Rafferty pulls off the front. It's time for Mikel Honore to go to work. Now, as I've already explained in the butterfly effect, and in this video, Honore told us ahead of time, before the stage even started, that his job was to light up the bottom of the climb, and Mikel Honore is honoring his word as he's drilling it on the front of the pedal for EF Education. You see Richard Carapaz at this moment. This is a tactical genius where Richard Carapaz had moved himself into second position on Mikel Honore's wheel. Cepeda's there, and James Shaw is in the picture. Cepeda comes up to the side there of Mikel Honore, looking like he wants to do some work. Mikel Honore clearly has this under control. Cepeda starts to drop back and even blow just a little bit, but still dropping back just a hair, and he's going to cause a little bit of problems for UAE team members eventually, along with James Shaw, as those riders are still in front. Now Mikel Honore's throwing down. It starts to blow up behind Richard Carapaz. As his two EF Education riders are blowing, James Shaw and Cepeda, this is causing a problem for UAE team members and now causing a problem for Del Toro. Or is it? Now again, we go back in the night before, the director sportif. Does Del Toro have the legs to climb with Richard Carapaz? Is he better than, or is he as good as Richard Carapaz, or is he less? Those always have to be the questions, and you might not have that exact answer when you went to bed last night, but you know for sure you've already messed up because you let the brake go up the road with Wout van Aert 10 minutes. You know for sure at this moment with Mikel Honore driving it on the front that two, and all of the domestiques shortly here for UAE team members are starting to blow behind Del Toro, one just in front of him. That's Igor Arieta, I'll call it. And Igor Arieta is trying to hold the gap, but it's blowing up in front of him. He's got a wheel or two bike lengths in front of him. There's a bike length behind him. We're looking at Del Toro. Then Del Toro closes up, goes around the side there of his teammate, and starts to close up to the back wheel of Richard Carapaz. Okay. We have some answers made right here if you're the director sportif of UAE team members. You know Del Toro is, at this moment, the early stages of Col de Fineste, you know he is as good as Richard Carapaz because he closed the gap up to the back wheel of the Ecuadorian from EF Education. So now if you're the director sportif, you're like, okay, first section's been made, first questions have been answered, Del Toro's on good form, he's closed the gap, everything's fine. Now you got to start setting the other strategies that you were thinking about last night where you had other options. Other options of, does Del Toro stay with his teammates? They set tempo for him. But if he's good, he has to follow Richard Carapaz because Richard Carapaz is 43 seconds down on the general classification, but has no satellite riders up the road. So if he's not as good and can't follow the wheel, you would stay with Brandon McNulty, you would stay with Adam Yates, and you would stay with Rafael Micah, who we see in that second group of 10 riders, along with Simon Yates and Derek G's in that group. Now, Simon Yates did a little working, Derek G did a little working, Simon Yates slipped back a little bit. The two riders in front are going up, but let me back the film up just a hair because this is super important. I told you we know that they're about even, Richard Carapaz and Del Toro at that moment, but if you back the film up, when Del Toro got to the back wheel of Carapaz, he sits up. He sits up and reaches into his back pocket, pulls something out of his back pocket, sits all the way up on the handlebars, either opens it up or rips the top, and then we see him eat or drink whatever he had in his hand, and we see him go back with one hand down on the bar. We see him clean his hand off on the back of his hip, and then we see him put his right hand back up on the handlebars and start going to work behind Richard Carapaz. Guys, I can tell you with 100% certainty with my 25 years of professional racing, when you close a gap up to Richard Carapaz that's thrown into effort after Mikel Honore disintegrated the whole peloton, launched Richard Carapaz, and Del Toro closes the gap. When you have the ability to sit up, reach in your back pocket, take both hands off the bars, you're riding no hands uphill, eat or drink whatever is in front of you, and then go back and wipe your hands off and then go to work, Del Toro's better. There's no doubt about it. So last night, the Director Sportif had questions that are getting answered at this moment that Del Toro clearly has better form than Richard Carapaz. I have some of my home skillets tell me that they believe Simon Yates' form changed from the day before, from 19 where he's getting dropped into stage 20 here. And I said, no, I don't think Simon Yates is faster or better or his form's changed. I think the other guys went slower on going up Col de Finesse. They're the two favorites. But at this moment with Simon Yates getting gapped off back there, who's now coming solo, coming across the gap, the reason why Simon Yates is able to close this gap is because Richard Carapaz is on the front. He does not want to pull for 15, 16, or 17 kilometers up to Col de Finesse right now, so he's backing off the throttle, which is allowing Simon Yates to come back up. Okay, Simon Yates gets there. Immediately throws in one attack. Carapaz closes it, as I explained on the butterfly effect. And Del Toro's doing what I can explain to you guys. I did the exact same thing up Leangarou in 2013 on the last and final stage of that Vuelta a España. I let Vincenzo Nibali go up the road. I steadily stayed on the pedals and just closed up at my pace without having to go into the red and then come back down. Remember, they're going up to the highest altitude here at the Giro d'Italia in 2025, over 2,000 meters. So Del Toro is racing ace tactics at this moment when he closes up simply to the back wheel of Richard Carapaz. Then Simon Yates throws in a second tack. Richard Carapaz covers it immediately. Del Toro does the same tack again. Steady Eddie finds his way back up. Richard Carapaz throws in what I believe to be his second attack at this moment. Remember, cameras are everywhere. I could be missing attacks. I'm only telling you what I can see from video. Carapaz throws in the second tack immediately. Del Toro's following it. Simon Yates follows. Then Simon Yates puts in a third attack. Carapaz follows it. Del Toro temples his way back up. The fourth attack is when Simon Yates gets the gap because Richard Carapaz allows it to happen. Okay, still at this moment, the Mexican kid, Del Toro's, ran tactically pretty solid throughout this whole Giro d'Italia with the exception of on stage 16 just forgetting to eat. Some minor tactics on stage 11 with Richard Carapaz letting them go up the road. Team decision made that call. It was wrong. Stage 9, gravel stone section of Strada Bianchi. Tactically should have worked with Egan Bernal. I'll forgive it because you have Juan Ayuso in the back group. But at this moment, when Simon Yates is going up the road, tactically, Carapaz is perfect. And I'll tell you right now that tactically, Del Toro is perfect at this moment too. If you can't control both groups, let one go and let in third, that's 1 minute, 21 seconds down on the general classification. Go up the road is a good tactic. But here's where UAE Team Emirates Director Sportifs failed the young Mexican rider. I don't believe they told him Wout van Aert was up the road. If you look at the tactics played out throughout the Col de Finesse from the moment Simon Yates went up the road, and you look at Del Toro always sitting second wheel behind Carapaz the whole time after multiple attacks, after Derek G had caught these guys multiple times, after Derek G had been pulling on the front, after Carapaz had attacked again, and after we see Simon Yates reach the gravel sections with 8 kilometers to go in today's stage with a 45, 50-second gap on the 2 leaders behind. At that moment, when he reaches the gravel section with 8 kilometers to go, at that moment, for sure, Del Toro has to go to work. He has to work with Carapaz 100%, no doubt about it. But I don't believe he was told Wout van Aert's in that top group, and you better worry, because if Wout van Aert is at the top waiting for Simon Yates, you're not going to make up any time. In fact, I believe the big guy can put a minute into you, if not a minute and a half, from the descent of that going all the way into the final 5 kilometers, and could easily launch Simon Yates after he's sitting back on the big guy's wheel, getting the best draft you could possibly ask for because the big guy is big. So he's going to be resting back there, eating, drinking, having tons of calories. He's going to launch with 5 kilometers to go. There's no way you can bring time back. So Del Toro is still not on the front going through the gravel section. He will eventually get on the front. He'll pull softly on the front. You'll see it's soft because Derek G comes back up and catches back on, and then he sets some more tempo. And the gap goes all the way out to 2 minutes while they're still on the gravel section and nearing the summit of the climb. And when it's at 2 minutes, finally Carapaz just throws in another big acceleration. This is how we know the two guys are faster than Simon Yates up Col de Finesse. They're stronger, not faster. Simon Yates pulled the fastest time. You can't argue with that. But we know they're stronger because Richard Carapaz, with his attack, he immediately brings back 15 seconds, then brings back another 20 seconds. So we see Simon Yates going through the crowd at the summit, nearing the KOM, and we see him at 1 minute and 40 seconds when he reaches the summit. The race is over, guys. At 1 minute and 40 seconds, he's 1 minute and 21 seconds behind the pink jersey. And of course, Richard Carapaz is at 43 seconds. So he's way behind now when we're talking about 1 minute and 40 seconds up there to Simon Yates, who we believe still, if you're sitting on the Chesterfield, don't know for sure, but you believe Wout van Aert is up there. Now, I called Wout van Aert a bit of a knucklehead, and one of the commenters said to me that Wout van Aert waited 7 kilometers down the descent because he didn't want to wait at the top and slow up Simon Yates through all the curves. If that's the truth, that is amazing strategy from Wout van Aert to get through the dangerous descent and then wait 7 kilometers later for Simon Yates to get on his wheel so that Simon Yates could go faster down the descent, pick up Simon Yates, and of course we know it's game over at that moment. But when we go back and look at the final gravel sections, Del Toro's only pulled in the last 200-300 meters of the gravel sections, go to the summit, and of course he's 140 behind, so the race is already over. You are not going to catch Wout van Aert. So when those guys are going down the descent and we see them looking at each other and Richard Carapaz is shaking his head, he's frustrated. In fact, he is absolutely livid, and that's why you see the expression on his face where he has no sign of any kind of happiness or hurting or anything. He is dejected. He is incredibly upset. So you know he's going to take it out on Del Toro in the pink jersey and just say, there's no way I'm going to work with you. UAE Team Emirates failed tactically for Del Toro. I cannot believe that it was the Mexican riders understanding that Wout van Aert was still up the road. The directors must have forgotten. If they had told Del Toro that he's up the road, if the directors had said you have to start chasing when the gap gets to 40 seconds, otherwise Simon Yates could possibly make it to the summit and have Wout van Aert over the top. Because even if you're 10 or 20 seconds behind Simon Yates at the summit of that climb and the big guy Wout van Aert's there to pull all the way down the descent through the valley and then up the soft part of the climb there. The last climb was 15K, but it's soft all the way to 5K to go. So if Wout van Aert's pulling that whole time, I think you'd lose a minute, minute and a half right there. So there's no way you can bring him back. Tactically, I don't think we'll ever hear it being told, at least not until Del Toro retires. When he's talking back about this 2025 Giro d'Italia, I don't think we'll hear Del Toro ever bring it up, but tactically I believe the director sportifs never told him Wout van Aert was up there. I believe tactically they never said you have to start pulling as soon as the gap got at 40 seconds because it's getting too big up to Simon Yates. And he played conservative the whole time. And if you tell me Carapaz is a better climber than Del Toro, Isaac Del Toro, I'll tell you you're wrong, and I'll remind you of what I told you in this story. Go back and look at the beginning. If you can bridge across a gap up to Carapaz after Mikel Honore did that lightning speed at the beginning of the climb, and you can bridge across to him and sit up, reach in your pocket and start bringing out food, you had to be better. There's no signs in this whole time going up Finesse that Del Toro did not look absolutely fantastic. His jersey's all the way zipped up. We look at the jerseys there of Derek G where it's all the way unzipped and he needs a maximum air to breathe. And with the exception of just throwing some water on his head occasionally while going up the climb, Del Toro looked fantastic facially. He looked fantastic sitting on the bike with his little spin in RPM. He looked fantastic everywhere except for tactically where the director sportifs failed him miserably, and that's why he lost the Giro d'Italia. Like and subscribe. I'll bring you guys into another video here of Beyond the Coverage sometime soon.